The National Electrical Code, specifically Section 210.8b2, addresses ground fault circuit interrupter, commonly known as GFCI, protection in commercial and institutional kitchens. This section defines a kitchen as an area with a sink and permanent facilities for food preparation and cooking, stipulating that receptacles in such kitchens require GFCI protection. The question arises when dealing with cord and plug connected ranges as to whether they qualify as permanent facilities. There are differing opinions on this matter. Firstly, one perspective argues that even though the ranges are cord and plug connected, they are typically installed in a fixed location and are used for regular food preparation and cooking. Adherents to this view would classify the kitchen as a commercial kitchen, thus mandating GFCI protection for the receptacles. Secondly, an opposing view posits that the NEC definition explicitly includes permanent facilities, and since cord and plug connected ranges are not permanently installed, as they can be easily moved or replaced, the kitchen should not be considered a commercial kitchen, negating the GFCI protection requirement. The NEC itself does not provide a specific definition for permanent facilities. However, the term implies a degree of fixed installation and permanence. To ascertain whether the ranges in the church kitchen should be considered permanent, several factors should be considered. One is how securely the ranges are attached to the kitchen cabinets or other structures. Another is how often the ranges are moved or replaced. The third is the nature and frequency of food preparation and cooking activities. To determine whether the ranges should be considered permanent, it is recommended to consult with a qualified electrician who can assess the specific installation and usage. The church might have other electrical safety concerns in the kitchen, such as the use of extension cords or overloaded circuits. Installing GFCI protection may be a prudent measure, even if the ranges are not considered permanent. GFCI protection provides an additional layer of safety against electrical shocks, especially in areas where water is present. It is crucial to interpret and apply the NEC correctly. Section 210.8 addresses GFCI protection for personnel, and subsection B pertains to other than dwelling units. Specifically, 210.8b2 focuses on kitchen areas in commercial and institutional locations. The key phrase in the code is permanent facilities for food preparation and cooking. This is what triggers the GFCI requirement for receptacles serving the kitchen area. The debate centers around whether a cord and plug connected range constitutes a permanent facility. To provide more clarity, let's consider various aspects of this issue. First, the definition of permanent needs to be explored. While the NEC doesn't explicitly define it, the term implies a fixed, non-temporary installation. A permanently installed appliance is typically hardwired or connected to a dedicated circuit without relying on a cord and plug. Second, the intent of GFCI protection is to protect people from electrical shock in damp or wet locations. Kitchens, with their sinks and potential for water spills, naturally fall under this category. Therefore, the presence of water and the potential for electrical hazards are significant factors in determining whether GFCI protection is necessary. Third, let's consider the physical installation of the range. Is the range simply sitting on the floor and plugged into a receptacle, or is it secured in place with brackets or other means? If it's easily movable, it leans towards being non-permanent. However, if it's somewhat fixed, it could be argued as being more permanent. Fourth, think about the usage pattern. Is the range used frequently for cooking meals, or is it only used occasionally? Heavy, regular use might suggest a more permanent setup, while infrequent use might indicate a temporary arrangement. Fifth, consider local interpretations and regulations. The electrical inspector having jurisdiction in the area may have specific interpretations of the NEC or local amendments that address this situation. It's always a good idea to consult with the local inspection authority for guidance. It's important to remember that code interpretations can vary, and the final decision rests with the authority having jurisdiction. Consulting with a qualified electrician is essential to assess the specific installation and ensure compliance with the NEC and local codes. The electrician can evaluate all the relevant factors and provide a professional opinion on whether GFCI protection is required for the receptacles serving the cord and plug connected ranges in a church kitchen. Also, the NEC 210.8b6 and 210.8d address specific appliances and equipment. If the cord and plug connected ranges are listed for use in a commercial kitchen and are subject to submersion or being washed, GFCI protection would be required. In summary, the decision of whether to provide GFCI protection for receptacles serving cord and plug connected ranges in a church kitchen depends on the interpretation of permanent facilities and the specific circumstances of the installation. Factors such as the degree of fixedness, the frequency of use, and local regulations all play a role in the final determination. Consulting with a qualified electrician and the local electrical inspector is highly recommended to ensure compliance and safety. Section 210.8b covers GFCI protection for personnel in other than dwelling units. It lists several specific locations and equipment requiring GFCI protection. Understanding the scope of this section is crucial for determining whether the church kitchen falls under its requirements. The key aspect of 210.8b2 is the definition of a kitchen. The code defines it as an area with a sink and permanent facilities for food preparation and cooking. If the church kitchen meets this definition, all 125 volt to 250 volt receptacles rated 60 amps or less must have GFCI protection. The central issue is the interpretation of permanent facilities. The NEC doesn't provide a clear-cut definition, leaving room for different viewpoints. Some argue that cord and plug connected ranges are not permanent because they can be easily moved or replaced. Others argue that their fixed location and regular use constitute a degree of permanence. The decision often hinges on the specific installation and the local interpretation of the code. The NEC 100 defines equipment as a general term including material, fittings, devices, appliances, luminaires, apparatus, and the like used as a part of, or in connection with, an electrical installation. Article 100 also defines utilization equipment as equipment that utilizes electric energy for electronic, electromechanical, chemical, heating, lighting, or similar purposes. This means the range would be defined as equipment. Article 100 defines a dwelling unit as a single unit, providing complete and independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. With this definition, 210.8 would not apply to the church kitchen. Section 210.8b applies to bathrooms, which a church kitchen is not. Section 210.8b2 applies to kitchens. If the church kitchen has a sink and permanent facilities for food preparation and cooking, it would need GFCI protection on the receptacles. Section 210.8b3 applies to rooftops. Section 210.8b4 applies to outdoors. Section 210.8b5 applies to sinks. Section 210.8b6 applies to indoor damp and wet locations. It is important to note that the 2023 NEC has changes to 210.8d regarding specific appliances. This includes dishwashers, and it states that GFCI protection shall be provided for outlets directly serving dishwashers in dwelling units. This does not apply to the church kitchen. In summary, to determine whether the cord and plug connected ranges in the church kitchen require GFCI protection, you need to consider the following. First, does the kitchen have a sink and facilities for food preparation and cooking? Second, are the ranges considered permanent facilities? Third, consult with a qualified electrician and a local electrical inspector for their interpretation and guidance. Fourth, review the specific requirements of NEC 210.8b2 and any local amendments. By carefully considering these factors, you can make an informed decision about GFCI protection for the church kitchen ranges. Remember that safety should always be a top priority, and providing GFCI protection can help prevent electrical shocks and ensure the well-being of those using the kitchen. To further elaborate, let's explore the concept of permanence in more detail. The term permanent typically implies something that is intended to last for a long time and is not easily changed or removed. In the context of electrical installations, permanent often refers to hardwired connections, where the wiring is directly connected to the electrical system without the use of a plug and receptacle. However, The NEC recognizes that cord and plug connections are acceptable for certain appliances and equipment, even in commercial settings. The key is to determine whether the cord and plug connection is intended to be a temporary or permanent solution. If the range is intended to be a long-term fixture in the kitchen and is used regularly for food preparation, it could be argued that it is a permanent facility, even though it is connected via cord and plug. On the other hand, if the range is only used occasionally or is easily moved for cleaning or maintenance, it might be considered a temporary appliance. To provide a more definitive answer, it's helpful to look at other sections of the NEC that address similar issues. For example, the NEC provides specific requirements for the installation of cord and plug connected appliances in dwelling units. These requirements often include provisions for strain relief, overcurrent protection, and grounding. While these requirements may not directly apply to commercial kitchens, they can provide guidance on how to safely install and use cord and plug connected appliances. Another relevant consideration is the listing and labeling of the range. If the range is listed for commercial use and is intended to be connected via cord and plug, it is more likely to be considered a permanent facility. The listing and labeling process ensures that the appliance meets certain safety standards and is suitable for its intended use. In addition to the NEC, local codes and regulations may also have specific requirements for electrical installations in commercial kitchens. These requirements can vary depending on the jurisdiction and the type of business operating in the kitchen. It's essential to check with the local electrical inspector to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Ultimately, the decision of whether to provide GFCI protection for the cord and plug connected ranges in the church kitchen rests with the authority having jurisdiction. The electrical inspector will consider all the relevant factors and make a determination based on the specific circumstances of the installation. Consulting with a qualified electrician is crucial to ensure that the electrical system is safe and compliant with all applicable codes and regulations. The electrician can provide expert guidance on the installation of the ranges and the need for GFCI protection. Remember that GFCI protection is designed to protect people from electrical shock, and it's always better to err on the side of safety. If there is any doubt about whether GFCI protection is required, it's best to install it. GFCI protection can save lives and prevent serious injuries. Therefore, prioritize safety and consult with qualified professionals to ensure that the electrical system in the church kitchen is safe and compliant.